as a genre has interested me a lot as of late. Crafting an atmosphere of pure darkness and intrigue is something that only a few have ever really succeeded at. Ridley Scott's horror movie Alien from 1979 is a perfect example of how to do things right. Alien as a franchise has a long and storied history, both as movies and as video games, and very few will tell you that they did it right outside of the movie itself. Ah, fuck. A terrifying world of creatures beyond comprehension. Action and sheer terror are used to pull off a plan of sheer human survival and ingenuity, something that the Alien movie and its sequel in 1986, Aliens, pull off with aplomb. But with a long history of video games, and even some movies that failed to impress, there's a lot to go over here. So let's take it one step at a time and look at the Alien video games and see what revolutions they've brought to both filmmaking and video games alike. Now, one thing I am going to say, I'm just going to cover the Alien video games. If I covered Alien vs. Predator and every game that Aliens had a cameo in, I'd be here for weeks. But with that being said, let's dive into it. Alright. Okay. This isn't funny anymore. Most people don't think of panic or spooky situations when you think of video games from the 80s and the 90s. They think Pong or Mario. The problem with video games is the interaction required. You have to strike a balance between something that's fun to play and fun to experience. It's a balance that's hard to strike properly, and the Alien games are no exception. The first attempt, in 1982 by Fox Video Games on the Atari 2600, was a poor man's Pac-Man clone, and sometimes a poor man's Frogger clone. Limited by hardware and the fact that video games were still considered children's toys at the time, it's unfortunately a glimpse of things to come. Alien on the Commodore 64 and ZX Spectrum was an entirely different style of game, and as a result came much closer to catching the vibe of the movie. Being most similar to a real-time strategy game, you control the crew of the Nostromo across all three ducks hunting for the alien. This game is actually fairly noteworthy. The game is definitely tense and does a good job of conveying horror and panic to the player, but it's clunky, it's hard to control or understand really what's going on, and compared to modern standards, the sounds are irritating and the visuals are downright seizure-inducing at times. But hey, at least you get a masturbating alien to make up for it all. I'm not kidding. This is actually in the game. Someone designed this. Someone approved this. The next release would be Aliens, the computer game, released in America as a more action-packed 6-minigame experience tied together by storyboard cutscenes. You pilot a ship to the planet, fight aliens, and the most exciting one, identifying equipment. Oh. It's really not bad in the grand scheme of things, it's just kind of a weird old-school computer minigame collection. It's kind of like a bootleg Mario Party, just thankfully without the blisters. Also, the load times on the Commodore 64 are insane, cutting down on enjoyment of the game quite a bit. Confusingly, a game with the same title was released the next year in Europe, being a very disappointing somewhat adventure game, somewhat first-person shooter that's hard as balls and frustrating to play. The interface sucks, the controls suck, there's not enough ammo, it's hard to tell what's going on and what you're supposed to be doing, and on top of all of that, it's not scary, it's just irritating. Looking at the titles for these games, though, we see that they're based off of Aliens, not Alien, which was also less scare and more action. It makes sense that this game would be less scary as a result, and unfortunately, these games set another trend that will continue. Aliens would become the focus, meaning more action and less horror in the games as well. Aliens, Alien 2 was released in Japan for the MSX computer system, and plays basically like a Metroid NES ROM hack starring a naked Ripley wearing ankle bracelets and shooting facehuggers with a rifle. Or shotgun, as the game calls it. See, this is funny, because they were actually planning on porting this game to the Famicom Disk System, the Japanese companion/add-on thing for the Famicom, the Japanese version of the NES. And a well-known NES and Famicom game titled Metroid is very heavily inspired by Alien, with series co-creator Yoshio Sakamoto talking about the influence in an interview with Retro Gamer. I just find it amusing how everything's come full circle. In 1990, an arcade game simply titled Aliens was released. And with it being an arcade coin muncher in the early 90s, it's a side-scroller action, kill everything in your path arcade game that you can play co-op with a friend. Multiple weapon types. You got flamethrowers, missiles, bombs, so on and so forth. Multiple enemies, and there's even some cool parallax effects where you shoot into the screen instead of sideways. It's definitely way more action than horror, arcade game and all that fun stuff, but it's fun, especially in co-op with friends. The early 90s were when the Alien games reached critical mass. Alien 3, based off the third movie, was released on the Amiga, Commodore 64, and Sega Master System in 1992, featuring a more adventure/action style of gameplay focused on saving civilians within a time limit. Home console versions were released in 1993 for the Nintendo Entertainment System and Mega Drive, featuring the same core game, just with upgraded visuals and controls for the new systems. Enhanced versions appeared on the Super Nintendo and the Genesis, as well as a handheld spin-off for the Game Boy. These games are all supposed to just be conversions of the same game for different hardware, but the SNES and Genesis versions have a good bit of tweaks done to them to add a bit more to do and to better take advantage of the hardware. Once again, these games are a more action take and they stray from horror, yet these games still don't really provide a proper simulation of any of the movies, let alone the third one. Alien 3, The Gun, an arcade light gun rail shooter. Once again, action, action, action. It's really fun to play, the only real problem being light guns don't really work on modern displays, so if you're emulating it you have to use analog sticks or keyboard inputs, which limits the fun quite a bit. I couldn't even get the mouse to work, but that could just be because I suck with MAME. The game looks pretty good, it looks fun. MAME doesn't handle it quite as accurately as it does others, so if you can, try to play it on real hardware so you get the full experience, but yeah, it's not bad. The monotony here doesn't really break until Aliens, a comic book adventure, where the gameplay shifts from action-packed mindless violence to a slower, more methodically paced adventure game, even though it's a little weird, and pre-rendered, and 90s. It actually reminds me a lot of the Journeyman project, another cool little adventure game with pre-rendered graphics that's more focused on exploration and interaction. Alien Trilogy, released in 1996 for PC, PlayStation 1, and the Saturn, takes a step in the right direction towards horror. They tried to make an FPS that captures the feeling of fear and hopelessness, being lost in the dark in a strange building, and they kinda got it right. The big issue here is, well, the game sucks. The game feel is pretty okay. It captures the horror and dread, similarly to how Resident Evil did so, while trying to make a game that plays like Doom. Which means that they accomplished that with horrible, weird controls, limited lines of sight, insane difficulty curves, and underlying FPS components that just aren't well polished or well implemented. Why do I need a shotgun to explode red barrels? That goes against every kind of mental conditioning that video games have done since like ever. Also, it crashes a lot, but we're getting there. Then there's Aliens Online. It's kind of hard to talk about this one definitively since it was an online shooter that's had its service shut down in 2000, but from what I've read online, it's a multiplayer focused shooter that people seem to really like. Two teams, one human and one alien, fighting each other in a class-based online shooter that, believe it or not, was free to download and only had a $10 a month subscription in the late 90s. Most of the problems about the game were just that it's too early for the hardware. Remember, this is the late 90s. The internet and the PCs of the time they weren't really robust enough to fully support the game that they really wanted to make. But with 20 to 30 people per side per game, I don't have to play it to know that it's more action than horror. Unless you count teleporting aliens on dial-up connections, that can be pretty scary. Alien Resurrection for the PS1, actually a title widely assumed to be the progenitor for dual-stick movement and look control. Also widely known for being unplayable on modern systems. It's notoriously buggy on every platform besides a real PS1, including Sony's later consoles. It's kind of hard for me to recommend a game to play when sometimes keycard doors just don't work if, you decided to play this on your PS3 instead of an actual PS1, but I digress. It's pretty good, it sets the mood, everything's fine. The controls are kind of clunky, but you definitely get immersed in the world, and it's cool having that this game be the first dual stick movement game. It really adds a lot to the atmosphere. Aliens Extermination. It's an arcade game that revisits the second movie. It looks pretty cool, seems to run okay. The only problem is that there's no way to emulate this game currently in 2017, so I have no idea how it actually does play. This one is more action movie cheese than anything else. And sadly, the game isn't even really that varied or unique to enjoy the cheese, like Area 51 is. Aliens Infestation is a Metroidvania-style game with an aliens code. Once again, coming full circle and having an alien game take inspiration from Metroid, which originally took inspiration from Alien. Funny how things like that work out. If I had to specify, I'd say Metroid Fusion was the source of inspiration here, just going off of enemy and environment design. Except it's annoying because every 5 steps your guy has to radio into HQ just to have them explain that a door with a 1 on it means you have and level 1 key, because, you know, people play video games are fucking dumb. Interesting game, polished game, just not an alien game. Alien Colonial Marines. No. One more arcade game, Aliens Armageddon. It's kind of a weird Borderlands-esque rail shooter, except this one's apparently somewhat good. I mean, there's still cheese, but not extermination levels of cheese. I wouldn't know though, because again, you know, can't really play it, but it looks cool. So many games, but very few follow the horror path. Most choose to follow the movie Aliens due to ball-numbing action, instead of the first movie's kinda, I don't know, hiding under a table, don't spook me. Which, I mean, I totally see why they did that, like, I get it. Action makes more money than horror, and especially so in video games, so I don't really blame them, but come on. There's so many Alien games out there. At least one has to approach the horror element while not managing to be terrible at everything else in the process, right? Well, in 2014, fans of the first movie finally got their wish. A game that's focused on horror, tense environments, and, most crucially, survival.
Alright guys, well, thank you very much for watching. I do really appreciate it. This video is a little bit different than I guess a lot of you are expecting, and that's for a very good reason. I actually was planning a really epic Season 2 reveal episode thing, and this entire video, for the most part, was actually going to be the opening to my Season 2 Episode 1 episode. That was redundant. But basically, I was just going to open up my review of Alien Isolation with kind of a retrospective look at most of the Alien franchise. And I showed it to some people and they said it was really good. But the script that I had written for Alien Isolation was getting way out of hand at this point. Like, I had like over an hour worth of review here, and I'm like, okay, like this is gonna be a nightmare to edit and produce and everything. So I actually chopped out the first little chunk. You know, tweaked the script a little bit, edited it here and there, added some more content, and that was the video you guys just watched. So yeah, leave me a comment down below telling me if you liked or disliked it. Let me know if you're looking forward to the Alien Isolation review, because it's gonna be pretty something just good. I can speak English, I promise. But yeah, be sure to follow me on social networks. I got the Twitters and the Facebooks, and if you really just want to follow me on Twitter, because I like to tweet. And with all that said, guys, I will see you next time. I just realized I don't have a way to do an outro now, because usually like I'll look away or I'll move or I'll do something. Yeah. I'm gonna look at my games. So yeah, peace out, guys.